The house sat at the end of Wilmore Lane like a secret no one wanted to tell. Wrapped in ivy and silence, 13 Wilmore had been standing for over a century. A fading Victorian beauty with chipped shutters and sagging gutters, as if the years weighed heavier on it than on any other home in Ellenton, Georgia. For most, it was just a rotting structure, a ghost of a once proud mansion. But for the people who lived nearby, especially the older ones who remembered the whispers, it was a place you didn't point at. A place you didn't name. The children who grew up in Ellenton were taught never to go near it. They weren't told ghost stories or warned with tales of monsters. It was more subtle than that. When a curious child asked about the house, grown-ups would change the subject. When teens dared each other to go up the crumbling front steps, they were met with sharp rebukes, followed by an odd silence, as if saying too much might wake something. The fear wasn't loud. It was generational, woven into the DNA of the town. It began in 1953. John and Margaret Harrow moved to Ellenton from Savannah after inheriting a modest fortune from John's father. They were young, in love, and enchanted by the idea of a quiet life in the country. Margaret fell in love with the house at first sight. The wraparound porch, the turret windows, the way the breeze passed through the trees and seemed to hum through the shutters. It was a dream, and it was cheap. Much cheaper than it should have been. The agent mumbled something about it being an old estate and needing repairs, but he never mentioned the tragedy that had preceded their arrival. No one did. They moved in during spring. The garden was overgrown, but Margaret had plans to fix it. John spent weekends working on the upstairs library, turning it into an office for the novel he swore he would finish. They talked about having children, about filling the house with laughter. For the first few weeks, it was perfect. But then the noises started. At first, it was subtle. The sound of creaking floorboards late at night, which wasn't unexpected in an old house. But soon, it became rhythmic, measured, as if someone were walking, slowly, up and down the stairs after midnight. John checked. Every time, the house was empty. The doors locked. The windows latched. Then there were the whispers. Margaret heard them first, on the porch, just before sunset, when the sky turned copper and the cicadas quieted. She said it was like hearing someone speak from inside a dream. Not quite words, not quite sound, just an impression, a breath against her ear when no one was there. She told John. He laughed it off. But she stopped sitting on the porch after that. One night in late June, John didn't come to bed. Margaret found him in the upstairs hallway, just standing in the dark. When she asked what he was doing, he simply said, "Listening." "Listening to what?" she asked. He turned slowly to face her. "To the house," he said. "It's trying to tell me something." The next morning, he had no memory of the event. Then came the final night. July 2nd, 1953. The neighbors across the street, the Burrows, said they heard a scream around 3:15 a.m. A single cry, sharp and short, followed by silence. When they looked outside, they saw nothing unusual. No lights, no commotion. They went back to bed. Margaret Harrow called the police at 6:42 a.m., her voice trembling. When officers arrived, they found John at the base of the staircase. His neck had been snapped. The expression on his face was what unsettled them the most. Eyes wide open, mouth frozen in a scream. Not of pain, but terror. No signs of struggle. No signs of forced entry. Just a broken neck. A fall, the coroner said. An accident. Margaret insisted it wasn't. She told them John had been acting strange. That he'd been hearing voices. That he was drawn to the basement. That the house didn't like to be ignored. But none of it was written in the report. Margaret left town 2 weeks later. Didn't sell the house, just left it. She lived the rest of her life in a small apartment in Atlanta. Never remarried. Never spoke publicly about her time in Ellenton, save for one rare interview with a local paper in 1964. When the journalist asked why she had abandoned the house, she stared at him for a long time and simply said, "That house is hungry." The article was buried in the back pages. No one paid much attention, but the deaths didn't stop. Over the next 60 years, the house would claim 6 more owners. Each one would move in hopeful, oblivious to the warning signs. Each one would ignore the whispers. Each one would die under circumstances so strange, so deeply unsettling, that even the most skeptical minds in Ellenton eventually stopped questioning whether something was wrong, and started just avoiding it. Now the house stands empty once again. But the wind still passes through its bones. The ivy still climbs toward its broken windows. And if you stand on the porch at dusk, especially when the air grows still and the shadows stretch long, you might hear something. A whisper, calling you inside. For nearly a decade after John Harrow's sudden death, the house at 13 Wilmore Lane remained untouched, abandoned, but not forgotten. The town of Ellenton treated it like a wound that wouldn't close. The hedges grew wild, swallowing the gate. Paint peeled from the siding like old scabs. Neighborhood kids dared each other to run up to the porch and touch the door, but most wouldn't get that far. Something about the place repelled people. And yet, in the summer of 1965, the house came alive again. Her name was Delia Marks, a schoolteacher in her early 30s, recently divorced and looking for a fresh start with her 6-year-old son, Corey. She wasn't a woman easily frightened. She came from a long line of Southern pragmatists, people who believed in hard work, good education, and no nonsense. She found the house through a small real estate firm in Valdosta. It was listed for half of what similar properties in Ellenton went for. A fixer-upper, they said. A chance to build a new life. Delia loved the old bones of it, the arched doorways, the high ceilings, the clawfoot tub. It has character, she told her sister on the phone. History. She had no idea how much. From the moment they moved in, the town watched. Neighbors brought over casseroles and pie, offered help with moving, and dropped hints Delia didn't understand. Mrs. Greta, who lived across the street, whispered, "If anything feels off, don't wait to leave, dear." Delia chalked it up to small-town superstition and thanked her politely. The first few days were ordinary, dusty, uneventful. Corey was quiet, but then again, he'd been quieter since the divorce. Delia gave him space. She set up his bedroom, painted it light blue, and even let him pick out a nightlight shaped like a moon. That first week, he made a new friend. Delia overheard him talking in his room, which didn't surprise her. Corey had always had a vivid imagination. But one evening, while unpacking books downstairs, she heard him giggling. Giggling like he hadn't in months. She paused, smiled to herself, and crept up the stairs. "What's so funny?" she called through his bedroom door. Silence. She opened the door slowly. Corey sat on the floor, staring at the closet. He looked up at her and said, "He doesn't like you to interrupt." Delia blinked. "Who doesn't?" He turned his head toward the dark, half-open closet. The man in the wall. Chills ran up her spine. But she forced a smile. "Sweetheart, there's no one in the wall." He didn't answer. Just stared at the closet like it might answer for him. That night, Delia moved a heavy dresser in front of the closet door. She didn't sleep well. In the mornings, she heard Corey talking to himself in hushed tones. But she never caught him in the act. Every time she asked who he was talking to, he would smile and say, "No one." Sometimes he'd say, "My friend." Once he said, "The man who crawls." By the end of the 3rd week, Corey had changed. His drawings, once colorful and cheerful, were now scribbled in charcoal and red crayon. Dark halls, stick figures with hollow eyes, black shapes towering over beds. Delia found one crumpled under his mattress. It showed a crude drawing of their house, with something underneath it, a dark pit, filled with teeth. That was when the dreams started. Delia would wake in the middle of the night gasping, heart pounding, with a taste of soil in her mouth. She dreamed of being buried, of being dragged through tunnels beneath the house, of hands pressing against her from the walls. One night, she awoke to find Corey standing at the foot of her bed. His eyes were open, but empty. His face slack. His voice, when he spoke, was wrong, too deep, too cold. "She's almost ready," he said. Then he collapsed. Delia took him to the local pediatrician the next day. Nothing. No fever. No sign of sleepwalking. The doctor suggested stress, maybe night terrors. Delia didn't push it. She was beginning to question her own grip on reality. The final day came on a Sunday. Quiet, clear-skied. The kind of day you'd expect peace, not horror. Delia ran a bath while Corey played outside in the backyard. She wanted to clear her head, to breathe. The bathroom filled with steam. The water was warm. She lit a lavender candle and closed her eyes. She never got out. The coroner's report was clinical. Massive blood loss from deep, clean incisions to both wrists. Official cause: suicide. But something didn't add up. The cuts were too clean, too symmetrical. The tub was undisturbed. No defensive wounds. No hesitation marks. Corey was found sitting calmly in the hallway, knees pulled to his chest. When the paramedics asked what had happened, he looked up and said, "She didn't do it. The house did." Those were the last words he ever spoke. He was placed in state custody, transferred between facilities for the next few years. At age 10, he stopped speaking entirely. He was diagnosed with severe dissociative disorder, possible schizophrenia. At 17, Corey was found dead in his room at the institution. He had hanged himself with a bedsheet. The note found next to his body was brief. It read, "It followed me here." In October of 1973, the Griggs family moved into 13 Wilmore Lane. They were a military family, orderly, practical, God-fearing. Thomas Griggs, a recently retired Air Force colonel, had spent 20 years flying combat missions overseas. His wife, Jean, was a devout Baptist and school librarian. Their twin daughters, Lila and Emily, had just turned 12. They were the kind of family who believed that discipline, prayer, and reason could solve any problem. They were wrong. The house had been listed for 2 years without a single offer. When Thomas found it, the price was so low he thought it had to be a mistake. He called the realtor, asked if there was structural damage, flooding, termite history, anything to justify the bargain. The man on the phone simply paused and said, "There's a history, but nothing on paper." That didn't matter to Thomas. He believed in facts. He believed in fixing things. They moved in on a Friday. By Monday, the girls were complaining about the upstairs hallway. "It smells like dirt," Emily said. "Like something rotting." Lila added, "It's loud at night." When Thomas asked what she meant, she just shrugged. "It sounds like someone whispering really fast." He wrote it off as creaky pipes and overactive imaginations. The house was over 80 years old, after all. It needed work. But the foundation was solid, the roof recently replaced, and the basement dry. Still, Jean didn't like it. Not the way it felt. Not the coldness that settled in the parlor even when the sun was shining. Not the way the lights flickered between 3 o'clock and 3:15 a.m. every single night. On the 4th night, the first real incident happened. Emily awoke to find Lila standing in the corner of their shared bedroom, facing the wall. "Lila," she whispered. No response. She got out of bed and touched her sister's shoulder. Lila turned slowly. Her eyes were wide. Her mouth moved, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. It was deep, male, ancient. "She's already in the walls," the voice said. "You'll be next." Then Lila collapsed. She had no memory of it in the morning. Jean, already on edge, begged Thomas to let her take the girls to her sister's house in Atlanta. He refused. He didn't believe in superstition, not ghosts, not hauntings, not anything that couldn't be measured. He told her it was just stress from the move, that the girls would adjust, that she needed to stop feeding into the fear. But the house didn't care what Thomas believed. On the 6th day, Jean walked into the kitchen and screamed. The walls were covered in writing. Hundreds of tiny, overlapping sentences carved into the plaster with something sharp. Each sentence was nearly identical. "I know what you did. I know what you are. I see you when you sleep." The family had no pets. No previous owners had left behind any tools. There were no signs of forced entry. Thomas tried to paint over the words the next day. The paint wouldn't stick. On the 8th night, Thomas set up motion cameras. He placed one in the hallway, one in the kitchen, and one just outside the twins' bedroom. If someone was sneaking around at night, if Emily or Lila were sleepwalking, he wanted proof. What the cameras captured shook even him. At 3:08 a.m., the hallway camera picked up movement. A figure, too tall, too thin, with joints that seemed to bend in the wrong directions, crawled across the hallway ceiling like an insect. It paused directly above the twins' room for nearly 30 seconds before vanishing. No doors opened. No windows broke. The figure simply disappeared. Thomas smashed the tape the next morning and told no one. On the 10th day, Emily went missing. They searched the house, the attic, the basement, every closet, every crawl space. Jean was inconsolable. Thomas paced like a caged animal. Lila just sat on the porch and stared at the yard. "She's not gone," she whispered. "She's underneath." When Thomas asked what that meant, Lila smiled, a strange, dreamy smile. "She's playing with the others. They live in the black room." That night, Jean took the girls and drove to her sister's home in Atlanta. She begged Thomas to come with them. He refused, said he had to finish what he started. He spent the night in the basement. Neighbors said they saw him carrying tools, a sledgehammer, a lantern, a crowbar. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. When police arrived the next morning, they found the basement floor broken open. A large hole, 6 feet wide, 10 feet deep, had been dug through the foundation. At the bottom was a narrow tunnel that led beneath the house. Thomas Griggs lay at the edge of the hole, his neck broken, his eyes staring upward in frozen terror. Next to him was a note, scrawled in his own handwriting, but jagged, panicked. It simply read, "There is no bottom. It goes down forever." Emily was found 2 days later, curled into a ball inside the linen closet upstairs. She was alive, but unresponsive. She would never speak again. The Griggs house was officially declared unfit for habitation in early 1974. But it still stood, empty, waiting. Over the following years, 13 Wilmore Lane would be visited by psychics, paranormal investigators, and journalists hoping to uncover the truth. None stayed long. Most refused to speak afterward. But in 1986, a man named Alan Reyes, a self-proclaimed medium, would move into the house with a documentary crew. He wanted to prove once and for all that the house was either haunted or cursed. He brought cameras. He brought microphones. He brought holy water and crucifixes. They lasted 6 nights. The man who walked into 13 Wilmore Lane in September of 1986 was no stranger to darkness. Alan Reyes, 41, had spent over a decade chasing the paranormal across America. From abandoned hospitals in Michigan to Civil War battlefields in Virginia, he had carved a niche as a brash, controversial medium with a flair for the theatrical. His hit cable series, Spirit's Edge, had garnered both cult status and sharp criticism for its sensationalism. Reyes didn't mind. He liked the attention. He believed fear was a tool, and he wielded it expertly. When he heard about the murder house in Ellington, he saw opportunity. A house where every owner had died mysteriously? It was perfect. The ultimate season finale. A ratings spike waiting to happen. So he put together a crew. Doug Phelps, the cameraman, silent, skeptical, and always chain-smoking. Mira Sloan, sound engineer, young, bright, fascinated by EVP, electronic voice phenomena. Terrence Moss, assistant producer, responsible for gear and logistics. And David Hahn, the intern, fresh out of film school, eager and unprepared. They arrived on September 19, 1986, with 5 cameras, a van full of equipment, and enough bravado to drown out the locals' warnings. Reyes stood in front of the house that morning and declared, "We're going to make history." He had no idea how right he was. Day 1. The setup. The team spent the entire day wiring the house. Each room received at least 1 fixed camera. The basement got 2. They set up temperature sensors, motion detectors, digital recorders, infrared tripwires, and microphones throughout the structure. Reyes even brought an EMF meter and an experimental spirit box, a janky radio static device that supposedly let the dead speak in real time. That night, they filmed their first walkthrough. Reyes, dressed in a long black coat, narrated to the camera like a man unveiling a ghost story. This is where Thomas Griggs dug into the earth and claimed it had no bottom. This is the room where young Corey Marks first spoke of the man in the wall. The house where no one survives. The crew chuckled nervously behind the scenes. At that point, it was just a shoot. A job. Something to cut together with dramatic music and spooky night vision filters. That would change by day 3. Day 2. Static and shadows. The first glitch appeared around 3:14 a.m. The static feed from camera 6, located in the second-floor hallway, suddenly showed a dark figure. Blurry, tall, twitching unnaturally. It stood facing the camera for nearly 6 full minutes before vanishing into a wall. They assumed it was an error, maybe a shadow or lens flare. Reyes insisted they replay it in slow motion. Frame by frame, you could see the figure's mouth moving. But no audio played. Mira isolated the track, boosted the gain, and filtered background noise. A whisper emerged, distorted but clear. "We remember. We wait. We rot." Reyes smiled like a kid on Christmas morning. "Finally," he said. "Something real." Day 3. The Black Room. They found the hidden door by accident. Terrence tripped on a warped floorboard near the kitchen and uncovered what looked like an old hatch covered in layers of linoleum and dirt. Beneath it was a stone staircase leading downward, not to the basement, but deeper, into a second, older sublevel that wasn't on any blueprint. They called it the Black Room. The walls were raw earth, hand-dug and soaked with mildew. Scratches lined every surface, long, deep gouges that looked clawed. In the center of the room stood a single rusted iron chair bolted to the ground. And behind it, on the wall, a sentence scratched over and over again. "It feeds on fear. It lives in silence." Reyes demanded they do a seance in the room that night. Mira protested. David begged him not to. Terrence threatened to quit. Reyes ignored them. Day 4. The seance. At 2 a.m., the crew gathered in the Black Room. They sat in a circle. Mira monitored sound levels. Doug filmed. David held a thermal cam. Reyes began to chant. Part Latin, part gibberish, all dramatics. The EMF meter went dead. The cameras rolled, but the feed turned black. Then Mira screamed. Her headset blasted a high-pitched tone loud enough to rupture her eardrum. She collapsed, bleeding from one ear. The audio recorded a voice beneath the tone. A whisper layered 12 times over itself. "The mouth is open. We come now. We come now. We come now." They rushed Mira to the hospital in Valdosta. She never returned. She later told authorities she saw a man without a face, crawling along the ceiling like a spider. Day 5. The panic. David vanished at dawn. He had been sleeping in the van. Doug found the van door wide open, equipment scattered, and David's shoes sitting neatly on the driver's seat. On the windshield was a message smeared in what appeared to be blood. "You let it in." They called the police. A search turned up nothing. Reyes refused to leave. "If we walk now," he said, "we lose everything." Terrence punched him, packed his gear, left that night. By morning, only Reyes and Doug remained. Day 6. The final footage. The last recording from inside 13 Wilmore Lane is timestamped September 24, 1986, 3:17 a.m. Doug is filming Reyes in the upstairs hallway. Reyes is holding the spirit box, which is scanning through radio frequencies, creating a distorted, rapid-fire static. Then it pauses. A voice comes through. Not Reyes. Not Doug's. Something else. "You are inside me now. The house is not the vessel. You are." The camera shakes. The hallway begins to breathe. The walls pulse inward and outward, like lungs expanding. Reyes begins to scream. Not words. Not speech. Just screaming. The footage ends abruptly as the lens is engulfed in darkness. Not black, but moving, alive. Doug's body was found 3 days later, just outside of Ellenton. He had walked 12 miles barefoot down Highway 90. His hands were shredded. His hair had turned pure white. He was delirious and mumbling when police found him. His only words, repeated over and over: "The house is watching. The house is watching. The house is watching." Reyes was never found. The footage was confiscated by local authorities at the request of Reyes' family. The documentary was never aired. Every attempt to retrieve the master tapes ended in disaster. Fires, corrupted drives, inexplicable power surges. By 1990, all original footage was believed destroyed. But whispers remain. Bootlegs of the seance audio have surfaced online. Choppy, warped clips believed to be from Doug's final recording appear on dark web forums every October. And one thing is always the same. At 3:17 a.m., the hallway breathes. By 1992, the house on 13 Wilmore Lane had become an untouchable relic, a rotting shrine to misfortune, cordoned off with city tape and plywood, dismissed by local realtors as unsellable. No one wanted it. No one except Elias and Lorraine Mercer. They were an older couple, married 42 years, both recently retired from their lifelong careers in education. Elias had been a high school history teacher. Lorraine, a librarian. Quiet people, rational, the kind who lived by logic, books, and strong tea. And yet, despite their grounded nature, or perhaps because of it, they didn't believe in curses. They believed in deals. The Mercers purchased the home for $11,000 at a state auction, after it had been officially declared abandoned and structurally recoverable. Elias saw it as a project. Lorraine saw it as a challenge. Every house, she told a local reporter, deserves a second chance. The town tried to warn them. Old Mr. Halderman from the hardware store refused to sell them a ladder. The postman left their mailbox empty. Church invitations never came. Even their next-door neighbor, Marcy Grubbs, stopped mowing near their side of the fence. Still, the Mercers moved in, with paint buckets, optimism, and no fear in their hearts. That lasted less than 6 months. Whispers in the wallpaper. The house was quieter than they expected. Too quiet. No creaks. No groans. Not even the hum of pipes. Lorraine said it felt airtight, like living inside a closed mouth. They started hearing things by the second week. Faint whispers through the walls, unintelligible at first, then clearer. Elias, in the upstairs study, swore he heard his own name being spoken in a voice that sounded like his father's, dead 18 years. Lorraine heard children singing in the attic. No lyrics, just a melody. It always played at exactly 2:14 a.m. They chalked it up to imagination. Age. The echoes of a creaky old house. But by week 4, Lorraine had stopped sleeping. She was pale, jumping at shadows. She started documenting everything in a leather-bound diary. Her final coherent entry read, "It's not the house that's haunted. It's the idea of the house. Gets inside you. It wants to know your fears. It becomes them." The contract. The Mercers vanished on March 3, 1993. No struggle. No forced entry. Just gone. The house was found unlocked, the kettle still warm on the stove, a copy of Paradise Lost open on the reading chair. On the dining room table sat a single sheet of paper, typewritten, unsigned, but unmistakably ominous. It read, "Agreement for tenure." Let it be understood that entry into this space is both physical and metaphysical. The structure feeds not on blood, but on presence. The living are currency. The house is collector. Payment is not optional. Repossession is permanent. You are now part of the architecture. End of terms. The document was later tested by forensics. No fingerprints. No ink inconsistencies. The paper was aged, as though printed decades prior, but the typewriter font was from a model manufactured in 1990. Police were baffled. The Mercer case joined the stack of unsolved disappearances linked to the house. Files were opened, then quietly closed. But the story didn't end there. The man with the cane. A month after the Mercers vanished, a man appeared in Ellington. He was sharply dressed, late 40s, wearing a dark fedora and carrying a silver-handled cane carved with serpents. He introduced himself only as Mr. Calder. He visited the town clerk's office and requested the full deed history for 13 Wilmore Lane. When asked why, he simply replied, "I intend to take possession." The clerk, a no-nonsense woman named Susan Park, told him the house was legally sealed due to repeated criminal investigations. Calder smiled, reached into his coat, and placed a folded envelope on her desk. Inside was a handwritten letter, notarized and signed by a former state official who had died in 1989. The letter contained only 2 lines. "He is the rightful heir. Do not obstruct him. The cost is too high." Susan resigned the next day and left Ellenton entirely. No one knows what happened to Mr. Calder after that, only that the house was unlocked 2 days later, and the front porch light, untouched for years, was found glowing again. The tenant list. By 1995, 13 Wilmore Lane was no longer listed on public real estate records. It didn't appear on Google Maps. It couldn't be found on tax rolls. And yet, people began staying there again. No one knew their names, but the lights would flicker at night. The curtains would shift. Cars, always black sedans or dusty old trucks, would park out front and then disappear. Rumors began circulating that the house had found a broker, a middleman between the mortal world and whatever darkness pulsed beneath its foundation. They said if you were desperate enough, broken enough, or wicked enough, you could make a deal. A real one. What the deal promised. Local legend holds that the house grants desires. Not wishes. Desires. The kind you bury. The kind that fester. The kind that ruin. A woman desperate to conceive after 9 miscarriages. A man trying to escape a murder charge in Mississippi. A teenager who wanted his bullies to vanish. They say these people entered the house. Some stayed a day, some an hour, and afterward, they got what they wanted. Every single time. But the cost. That was harder to track. Some simply disappeared. Some died years later in grotesque, inexplicable ways. Others were found sitting in their homes, staring at the wall, eyes wide, unable to speak. One man, a former stockbroker from Atlanta, was found in a motel room 6 weeks after visiting the house. He'd clawed out his own eyes and left a note on the mirror. "I saw the true form of what lives there. It is not God. It is not devil. It is the empty space between names." Back to the beginning. In 2002, a paranormal researcher named Lena Marlowe made one last attempt to document the phenomena at Wilmore Lane. She didn't go inside. Instead, she parked across the street for 30 consecutive nights, filming, documenting, and monitoring changes in light, noise, and atmosphere. On the final night, she captured a frame-by-frame time-lapse of the house between 3 a.m. and 3:17 a.m. At exactly 3:13 a.m., all the windows glowed red. At 3:14 a.m., a figure appeared on the porch. Black suit, silver cane, fedora. At 3:15 a.m., the front door opened, and dozens of smaller shapes, thin and distorted, poured out into the yard like smoke or shadow. By 3:17 a.m., the house was dark again. Lena published one screenshot to her now-defunct website with the caption, "They are no longer contained." She disappeared 4 days later. The house at 13 Wilmore Lane no longer looks abandoned. Its porch light still flickers faintly every night at 3:14 a.m. The roof, once caved in and splintered by years of neglect, now gleams with black slate tiles that weren't sold anywhere in the state of Georgia. The door, still the original, bears no signs of wear. Its brass knocker, shaped like a coiled serpent, shines as though polished daily. But no one in Ellenton has seen anyone enter or leave in over a decade. And yet, the house knows. It watches. And it remembers. The last visitor. In October of 2017, a popular urban explorer and YouTuber known as Casey Vega posted a teaser video titled, "Inside America's Most Haunted House, 13 Wilmore Lane." It showed him and 2 friends standing at the gate, drone footage sweeping over the roof, and Casey confidently announcing, "No one has been inside for over 20 years. Tonight, we break that streak." The full video was never uploaded. Casey's channel went dark the following week. His last social media post, a now-deleted tweet, read, "We went in. One of us didn't come out. This place is not empty. It breathes." His body was never found. The other two friends, Emily Costa and Jordan Reyes, were discovered on the side of Route 9 2 days later. Disoriented, barefoot, and unable to speak. They've been institutionalized ever since. Neither has uttered a word. But Emily draws. Every day. Dozens of pages. Piles of paper, all filled with sketches of the house from different angles. Most are eerily accurate. Floor plans, attic shapes, stained glass window details. But one image is always repeated. A room that doesn't exist on the public record. A black hallway that leads to a door marked only by a red X. When a psychologist asked her what's behind that door, she wrote just 2 words. The answer. Theories, hoaxes, and the uncanny truth. By now, the legend of 13 Wilmore Lane has taken root across every corner of the internet. Reddit threads, TikToks, conspiracy podcasts. Some say the house is a government experiment in environmental psychosis, wired with infrasound, radiation, or mind-altering frequencies. Others believe it sits on a spiritual fault line, a bleeding seam between dimensions. A few even suggest it's a living organism, disguised as architecture, a predator in the shape of a home. But amid the noise, one fact remains disturbingly consistent. Everyone who has entered the house either disappears, dies, or goes mad. No exceptions. The Survivors Club. In early 2020, a reclusive author named Malcolm Vire published a memoir titled Through the Keyhole, claiming to be a former resident of the house back in 1975. He said he was only 5 years old when his parents vanished inside it. He survived by hiding in the basement for 2 days until a gas inspector found him. Malcolm's book was largely dismissed as horror fiction, until readers found coded messages hidden in the chapter titles. When decoded, they spelled out a single sentence. "The house marked me. I am still dreaming its rooms." After the book's release, a private online forum began to surface, inviting alleged house survivors to share their stories. Posts were cryptic. Usernames changed weekly, but recurring details surfaced. People spoke of a mirror that didn't reflect them, but showed someone else's face. Of hearing music from eras they never lived through. Of losing entire days inside a room with no windows and no clocks. Of encountering a man in a black suit and silver cane, who asked them one question. What are you willing to give up? To never be afraid again. One post, from a user known only as Hallway R, ended with this line. You don't stay in the house. It stays in you. The property that never leaves. What makes the house different is not that it kills. Many places have seen death. What makes it terrifying is its pattern. The invitation it seems to extend. The deaths and disappearances, while horrifying, are almost secondary. It's the effect on those who hear about it, who become obsessed, who start to dream of it even before they've seen it. A 2018 study at a university in Massachusetts found that participants who were shown photographs of the house experienced a 41% increase in parasomnia events, night terrors, sleepwalking, even episodes of sleep paralysis. One participant jumped from a 3rd-floor window during REM sleep and survived with a fractured pelvis. He said he was trying to run from the red door. This study was pulled within weeks and quietly buried by the university. No official reason was given. You're reading this for a reason. You, reading this now, you're not here by accident. You may have come out of curiosity. Or maybe someone mentioned the story in passing. Perhaps you saw a comment, or clicked a random link at 3 a.m. But now the house knows you. It's whispered your name. It remembers your eyes. It wants to show you something. A glimpse. A door. A mirror you haven't looked into yet. You may dismiss this as fiction. An internet creepypasta. A well-crafted tale. But when the dream comes, and it will, you'll find yourself standing in a long hallway, the floorboards black as coal, the walls bleeding with strange wallpaper patterns that shift when you blink. And at the end, you'll see it. The red X. Do not open that door. Because what waits inside doesn't want to be forgotten anymore. Epilogue. The house is not done. A recent Google Earth update tried to map 13 Wilmore Lane again. What appeared wasn't a house, just a hole in the earth. No shadows, no grass, just void. When Reddit sleuths examined the image's metadata, they found one corrupted string of code embedded deep within the file. IT knows who's looking. And if you made it this far, it knows you now. Sleep well. What did you think of the case? Please share your thoughts in the comment below. If you want more video like this, please be sure to like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more true crime videos. See you in the next one.